Hi, everybody. It is now my time to share with you a little bit more about communicative language teaching, or CLT. And I am drawing a lot from Van Patten's book on, while we're on the topic, Bill Van Patten on language acquisition and classroom practice. But he's been an influential person in second language acquisition in terms of developing communicative language teaching. And so this is the gold standard for us moving forward in our goals for teaching in the future. So let's get into it. All right, so first question, is this a communicative language teaching task? If I said to you, say and write each of the sentences in the past tense. So I walk to school every day, you would change it to I walked to school every day, etc. Okay, so what do you think? Does that seem to be a communicative language teaching task? Right? We're just guessing at this point because you haven't been given that formal definition yet. All right. Well, hopefully you said no, because there is no real communication here. We're just changing the verb. You might not even know what this sentence means, but you're just trying to change the verb by adding ed to it, right? Or taking off the s and adding d. She studied. Okay. How about this one? Rewrite the statements as yes, no questions. She lives in Raleigh. So the question would be, does she live in Raleigh? Yes or no, right? They are studying for the exam. Are they studying for the exam? He can speak Spanish. Can he speak Spanish? So, changing the word order so that there is a question. What do you think? Communicative language teaching task? No. Right. I hope you said no. Okay, how about this one? Underline the correct verb form. Choose the correct verb form. She go or goes to the school every day. She goes, right? They is or they are, my classmates, they are. So again, what do you think? Is there communication going on here? Hopefully you said no. That's right. Okay, what about this one? Interview your partner and find out what he or she did last night. What do you think? Is there some communication going on here? If you're starting to think that, yes, this sounds better, you're on the right track. Okay, so let's talk about it. What is communication? This is really the most important part, right? For communication to happen in the classroom or anything is that you must have the expression, interpretation, and sometimes negotiation of meaning in a given context. Communication must also be purposeful, must have a purpose. So without communication in the classroom, learners are not going to acquire language. That's why this is so important to us. So in every lesson that you prepare, you want to think about, are my students having opportunities to express things, right? Are they having opportunities to interpret, to maybe listen to a classmate, to understand? Maybe they have to negotiate, like, what did you mean? Did you say? And there's a purpose behind it, meaning that it fulfills some larger, higher purpose besides just practicing English. So they're not just conjugating verbs for conjugating verbs' sake. They're not just asking what they did last night, to practice the past tense. They're asking what they did last night so that they can, I don't know, fill out a survey and find out how many students studied and how many students went to the Canes game, right? So there has to be a purpose behind the communication. If teachers and students are not engaged in the expression and interpretation of meaning, what they're doing is not communicative, even though we often say this is communicative. Some of those earlier examples that you saw, these are taken from communicative language textbooks. But you can see these are not communicative. There is no expression, negotiation, interpretation, and purpose behind this activity. Okay. So what is a communicative purpose? There's kind of two main purposes for communication. There's psychosocial purpose, and then there's cognitive informational purpose. So psychosocial purpose is establishing, maintaining relationships. So asking your classmates about their hobbies because you're trying to get to know them and build friendships, maybe find a common passion that you have. Cognitive informational is when you're trying to learn something new about other people or the world around us, or they're trying to obtain information to complete another task. So Maybe I am, and sometimes they can overlap. Sometimes you can have both psychosocial and cognitive informational in the same task, because that's important to notice. But something cognitive informational would be like, I am trying to find out the exchange rate of money so that I can know how much something would cost in another country. Or I'm trying to find out how many students went to the Canes game last night so that I can find out if they're ready for the test that will be given. Okay. So that's cognitive informational. We'll have some more examples of that as well. The third use of communication is entertainment, and that's like for humor, maybe poetry falls into that. Maybe like a monologue could fall into that as well, but we will not use that as much in for the purposes of our classroom preparation. Okay, so what then are communicative language tasks? So communicative tasks, notice the word is task, require expression, interpretation, sometimes negotiation of meaning, and they must have a purpose. So going back to that definition, is this a communicative language teaching task? Interview your partner so that you can create an informational sheet for your professor about your partner. Do you see how this is a little bit different from the example we saw at the beginning of the class, right here? Interview your partner and find out what he or she did last night. How is it different? It's different because there's a real purpose. On this one, you are interviewing your partner so you can create this sheet, this card that your professor or teacher will keep and refer back to when they're trying to remember the names of students in their classes. So there's a real task beyond just practicing English. Now, do we always get to this, gold standard of communicative language teaching tasks? The answer is no. Doing an activity like we saw here, interview your partner, find out what he or she did last night, report back to the class. This is also good. It's not fully on the end of communicative language teaching task, but it is pretty far along. It's certainly better than what we saw here, or here, or here, right? And if you have been studied a language before, I bet you have done activities like this in the past, right? So this is where we're trying to get our tasks in our classroom. So just keep that in mind. We're trying to move from not at all communicative, those terrible tasks that do not help students acquire language, to very communicative with a real world purpose. Language is used to accomplish a genuine task, right? And sometimes we might fall somewhat in between here, and that's okay. That's good. We don't need everything to be number 6, but maybe, 4 or 5 or 6 would be nice. Throwing in maybe a number 3 from time to time, where it's predictable but limited, and then trying to stay on this end of the continuum. Okay? Okay, well, good. So along that line of continuum, just thinking about exercises would be on the not at all communicative side of things, and tasks would be on the very communicative side of things. Somewhere in the middle would be what we call activities, right? Partially communicative, but sometimes they could be viewed, especially by the learners, as, oh, this is just English language practice disguised as a communicative task. Okay. Mythbuster, reminder, students need to practice vocabulary and grammar as a part of learning to communicate. This is not true, right? Despite how you've probably been taught languages in the past, what helps us acquire language are when we get to have a complex interaction where we get to express ideas, interact with somebody else, negotiate meaning with a real purpose. Okay, not when we practice grammar or when we practice vocabulary lists. That is not how we acquire language. Sorry. Okay. Now we have to talk about these next two are both tasks. Okay, so I'm already telling you they're both communicative. They're on that green side of the continuum. They're both communicative. They're both excellent, but they're different in a different way. And I want you to try to think about how they're different. So take a look at this. this would be a task I would give you. And I would say, okay, look over the activities, the list, and make check marks about the ones that you did yesterday. Okay, so did you read? Check. Works on the computer? Check, check. Worked out or exercised? Check. Rode my bike? No, X. Walked somewhere? Check. Drove somewhere? Check, 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 right? Watched a TV, cleaned my house, cooked. Okay, so you would have students fill that out. Then the next step, interview your partner, asking them if they did the activities from step one. The question you need are below. Note the person's response. So this is giving you the question. Did you read something? Yes, I did. No, I didn't. Okay, and you would tally those. Did you work at the computer, etc. Then the last step is the student would rate themselves and their partner based upon the information they obtained to place them on this continuum of very sedentary to very active. And then we would present those to the class. Okay, so compare that, communicative, real purpose, right? Expression, interpretation, negotiation of meaning, all there. Compare this to this one. List 10 activities that you did yesterday. Okay, I might say I worked on my computer, I recorded a video, I ate lunch, I bought groceries, I did laundry, I walked the dog, right? All the things you did. Now interview someone in class asking if they did the activities you listed. Okay, notice here you have to come up with the questions yourself. Did you go to the grocery store? Did you do laundry? Did you take the dog for a walk? And you note the person's response, and then rate yourself and your partner again on that scale, who's more active and who's more sedentary, based upon the activities that you did, and your partner would do the same thing. So again, it's communicative, right? There's a real purpose in terms of trying to find out how active or sedentary we are as a class. There is expression, there's interpretation and negotiation of meaning. But how are they different? Which one would require more language proficiency? Task A or task B? If you said task B, you're right. So task B has considerable more language demands on the language speaker than task A. Task A would be appropriate for students who are maybe on a lower end of proficiency, who need some more scaffolding, they need some support. We have statements here, we have model questions, much easier for them to be successful at this activity, right? If they're a beginner learner. And so I share this with you to say that even if you have beginners, you can think about how you can provide them with enough scaffolding so that they can be successful at a communicative language teaching task, right? And limit the amount of demands you give them. Okay, we call these input-oriented tasks. Those are the ones with the lower language demand, where they're getting a lot of input, like they got that statement, those statements of things they did yesterday. They just have to make a check mark and understand them. They don't have to produce them. Versus output-oriented task, which was a higher language demand. Write down 10 things you did yesterday. Okay, that requires a lot of knowledge of vocabulary, grammar, a lot of things that you have to be able to express in your output. And so it's important for you to think about 4 domains of language development that you want to have your students developing, right? Listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So you don't want to just focus on, say, on speaking, right? You also have to have them doing listening. You can't just focus on reading. You also have to have them doing writing. 4 domains. But 2 of these domains are receptive and 2 are expressive. So receptive would be listening, reading, input. Expressive would be speaking, writing, anything that goes out to the public, right? And so as you've probably noted with your own language journey, speaking and writing tends to be more difficult than listening and reading, right? And of course, speaking more difficult than writing because speaking doesn't give you as much thinking time as writing does. You can stop and go back, etc. Right? So for our beginner learners, we can use more input-oriented activities than output-oriented activities to lower the language demands on them, but still have them communicating real authentic things in the classroom, which again leads to language acquisition. Okay, so this essentially says the same thing that I just said. I have some more examples of communicative language tasks that you can visit in the PowerPoint, and some examples students had given me, and then a real live textbook from Azerbaijan that I've used, and thinking about how we might rewrite activities to become language tasks. And that is going to be your task as you continue through your coursework. Just thinking about how you can form communicative language teaching tasks in your language classes and head towards that right side of the continuum that's more communicative than the other side, even though I know that in your own language journey, you likely were on that other side. And maybe after years and years of dedicated work, you have acquired language. But for all of our learners to be successful, the more communicative language teaching tasks we can give them, the better they will acquire language in the time that we have them, that short amount of time in class. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and reviewing all this important information. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.